The Penguins' Western Canada swing concludes this weekend with a back-to-back against the Edmonton Oilers and then the Vancouver Canucks. Hunter and I are going to get you ready for those two games and more on this edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast.
Your Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Patrick Damp. You can follow me on Twitter at synonym for wet. Joined as always by my co-host, the one and only Hunter Hodes, getting his hair nice and fresh for this episode. You can also follow our show's account at LO_Penguins. And of course, we appreciate you making this your first listen or watch of the day because we're your team every day. And don't forget that we are free and available wherever you get your podcasts as well as YouTube. And before we dive in today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet and you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com to get started. The Penguins' Western Canada swing is at its end, Hunter, and they've got 2 games to go, a back-to-back that starts tonight at 9 o'clock Eastern time against the defending Western Conference champions, the Edmonton Oilers, and the one and only Connor McDavid. Now, this is an interesting matchup for the Penguins tonight because they have not had much success at all against the Edmonton Oilers in their last 6 games. They are 0-6, and they have been outscored by the Oilers in those 6 games 33-9. And you hear that and you think, oh, geez, this is going to be a loss for the Penguins. But then you remember it has not been the best start to this season for the Edmonton Oilers. They currently are 7th in the Pacific Division. They are 2-4-1 with a goal differential of -13. And while Connor McDavid is still Connor McDaviding, the rest of the team around him, it has been a struggle for them to start. So this could be an opportunity for the Penguins to turn some things around, not only break this 6-game losing streak to the Oilers, break this 2-game losing streak that they're on right now, and finally beat a playoff team. So Hunter, in your estimation, what do the Penguins have to do tonight to get out of Edmonton with a victory?
Well, it's pretty simple. You got to slow it out and Edmonton's big guns any way you can. I mean, McDavid, he's going to get his. I mean, he's already had another really good start to a season. 3 goals, 8 points in 7 games. He's not lighting the league on fire like he normally does, but that's still a very Connor McDavid-like start. Leon Draisaitl, he's also been great with 3 goals and 6 points in 7 games. Jeff Skinner, really nice addition by the Oilers front office over the summer, by the way. 2 goals, 4 points in 7 games, but they haven't had some of their other big guns get going yet. You don't want Evan Bouchard to have a big game tonight. 1 goal, 2 points in 7 games. He's been really quiet to start this season, but when he's on his game, this is a top 10 defenseman in the NHL. They don't call it the Bouch bomb for no reason with how great of a shot he has from the point. You also want to make sure you continue to limit Zach Hyman. Hyman has had a really bad start to the season. No goals, no points in the Oilers' first 7 games. And I like to call him the merchant because he scores a lot of his goals from right around the area where Michael Bunting gets a lot of his goals. 5-10 feet out, he cleans up the garbage, gets the tap-in type goals. So you want to continue to play well against him like you've seen other teams play well against him so far this season too. But the main thing is you gotta somehow, some way slow down Edmonton's big guns because I mean, even though Edmonton has had a really poor start to the season, and that's the 2nd year in a row that this has happened, this is still a very dangerous team. I still get nervous seeing this Oilers forward group going up against this Penguins defensive group just because the Penguins have been the worst defensive team in the league to start the year. So they're going to have to really simplify things, especially in their own end, if they want to get it done. Their goaltending, Edmonton's, it's been kind of up and down. Stuart Skinner, he's not going to win you most of the games, but he's kind of just an average goalie. I think he's definitely not, again, some of the other top goalies in the league. Like they'll see, Shesterkin, Vasilevsky, Hellebuck, etc. But he's still at least good enough to play, fine overall. But again, that's what it really comes down to. Simplifying their game in their own end, creating chances like they have been all season, but limiting Edmonton's attack because they can break out at any time, even though they've been limited to 2 or fewer goals in 5 of their first 7 games.
This is a very dynamic Edmonton team. We have seen this for the last couple of seasons. They are very reminiscent of the early Penguins days with Crosby and Malkin when they could just open up a game and take over it. So that is always looming over an Edmonton matchup. As for the Penguins, we found out this afternoon that Yoel Blomqvist will get the start in net for the Penguins. We will talk more about the goaltending situation as well as a couple other stories to come out of the Penguins Western Canada trip later in the show. But there isn't going to be much change to the lineup when they take the ice tonight. It was an optional skate this morning, so you didn't see any sort of line rushes or anything like that. But at practice on Thursday, you pretty much have the same lineup. Crosby with Rustin and O'Connor, Malkin with Bunting and Raquel, Eller with Bolivier and Glass, Achari with Hayes and Puljujarvi, Pettersson and Letang, Grzelcyk Carlson, Graves and St. Ivany, with Shea and Puustinen the likely scratches here. So that also means that Alex Nedeljkovic will back up Yoel Blomqvist tonight. And I think this is a really good proving ground for this group tonight. I know that we had a very rough start with these quote unquote new defense pairings, your Carlson Grzelcyk pairing, Letang and Pettersson, who have played together before. We'll see if this is a good bounce back game for them. But like you said, for the Penguins tonight, it has to be a simplified game. They can't turn this into a track meet. They will get absolutely run out of the building if they try to go shot for shot with the Edmonton Oilers, and it would take a Herculean effort from Yoel Blomqvist if that was the case. And even if it was a Herculean effort, when you look at the talent on the Edmonton Oilers forward group, I don't know a goalie out there, save for maybe Sergei Bobrovsky, who did pretty well in the Stanley Cup final, that's going to be able to shut them down. So for the Penguins tonight, you have to tidy up that defensive zone. If for no other reason, you don't want to spend a lot of time there. If you are going to give the Edmonton Oilers extended looks, they are going to make you pay. So they have to be a little bit crisper on the breakout. They have to be more responsible with getting to their positions and playing solid defense. And this will be a test to see if this team has learned anything from the first few games.
Right. And I know this also sounds so cliche to say because you can say this for any game, but especially in this one, do not take penalties against the Oilers, please, for the love of God. I mean, their power play is beautiful to watch when it's in motion. They can put out McDavid, they can put out Draisaitl, Nugent Hopkins, Hyman in front, and they can have Bush just firing from the point and also being a really good playmaker. I understand the Penguins penalty kill has at least been fine to start the year, but please, do not try to turn this into a special teams fest or you will also get burned. You need to play as much of this game at 5-on-5 as possible, though if the Penguins can get a couple power plays, that would be nice because the power play has been at least better to start this year compared to last year. Now, you also did say that this is kind of like a prove-it ground game for everyone, but especially I think Yoel Blomqvist. He's had a good start to his NHL campaign, but how does he do going up against all that firepower in that Edmonton lineup? I'm curious to see. And one more thing, this would be a big game for Sidney Crosby to come back out of his shell a little bit and show everyone that, oh yeah, I'm still not even close to being cooked. And don't get me wrong, people, he's not close to cooked, but he's definitely had a bit of a slow start to the season. I really want to see if he has a big game tonight in front of the Edmonton crowd, especially after on Thursday, Connor McDavid was like, yeah, Sidney Crosby's going to be the captain of Team Canada. It's not even close. I really want him to have a big game tonight.
And we know throughout his career, when the lights come on, he shows up. He did this, and it honestly might have been their last win in Edmonton, or at the very least, it was one of their last Edmonton victories where he put on a show in overtime to beat the Edmonton Oilers with a gorgeous goal. And that was a not so subtle shot to the rest of the league to say, I know you're all obsessed with this guy, but don't forget about me. So this would be a perfect night for him to come out of his shell. And you have to figure with all the pressure of being in Edmonton, going up against the next one who, I mean, we can't even really call him the next one at this point. He is very much here in the best player on the planet. It would be a very good spot for Sidney Crosby to once again say, hey, remember me? I was the guy for a long time. So we will see. That game is 9:00 tonight in Edmonton. For all you night owls like Hunter Hodes, it is a late game, so you'll be able to catch that one on late night TV.
And do you want the box score for the last time the Penguins beat the Oilers?
Go ahead.
So they won 5-2. I was a senior in college in 2019 when the Penguins last beat the Oilers. So Trevor Weedle scored for the Penguins in that game. Joseph Blandisi also scored for the Penguins in that game. Old friend Jared McCann, Chris Letang, and then, of course, old friend Brandon Tanev in a 5-2 win. So that was not the game that Crosby had his crazy heroics. That was actually a little bit after that one, but that was the last time the Penguins beat the Oilers, a 5-2 win in 2019.
It's been a while, but no better night than tonight to reverse that trend. We will see what they do. Like I said, 9:00 from Edmonton tonight, but that's going to do it for our first segment. When we come back, guess what? They're right back at it on Saturday night. So we're going to get you ready for a game against what might be Hunter's second favorite team, the Vancouver Canucks. But we will do that when we return after we tell you about our first sponsor, and that is Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best place to get real money sports action with over 10 million members and billions of dollars in awarded winnings. Prize Picks has made daily fantasy sports accessible to all. You just pick more or less on at least 2 players for a shot to win up to 100 times your cash. Run your game all season long on Prize Picks. Prize Picks is the best way to get in on sports action in over 30 states, including Pennsylvania, California, Florida, Georgia, Texas, and more. And it's the only real money daily fantasy platform with an injury insurance policy. So your lineups stay in play even if one of your players gets injured. If your player leaves the game in the first half and doesn't return, Prize Picks keeps your lineup live. So sign up today and you'll get $50 instantly when you play $5. You don't even need to win to receive the $50 bonus. It's guaranteed. If you think tonight's the night that Sidney Crosby, Evgeny Malkin, or even maybe that Connor McDavid guy is going to go off, just go ahead and make that pick and you can win real money. I've said it before. You guys know I am absolutely terrible at season-long fantasy, but daily fantasy, oh, buddy, call me Russell Wilson because I'm in the kitchen cooking on daily fantasy, and I love doing that on Prize Picks. So download the app today and use code LOCKEDONNHL to get $50 instantly after you play your first $5 lineup. Again, download the app, use that promo code LOCKEDONNHL to get that $50 bonus after playing your first $5 lineup. Prize Picks, run your game. All right, welcome back to the Friday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm Patrick Damp. That's Hunter Hodes. And if a 9:00 start tonight wasn't your thing and you want it to be even later, well, guess what, friends? You've got a 10:00 game on Saturday night when the Penguins go to Vancouver to take on a lot of old friends in Vancouver. And just like Edmonton, despite being a very, very good team, it has been, I don't want to say a slow start for the Vancouver Canucks, but it's been slower than expected. They're 3-1-2, +2 goal differential. But unlike the Edmonton Oilers, a lot of players at the top of their lineup have been performing extremely well. Brock Besser leading the way with 4 goals, 2 assists for 6 points. Pittsburgh native, sort of, JT Miller, 3 goals, 3 assists in 6 games. Connor Garland, same stat line, 3 for 6. You've also got Quinn Hughes, one of the best defensemen in the league, a goal and 5 assists. So along with that, 2 other old friends are near the top of the Vancouver Canucks stat list. That is old pal Teddy Bluger with 2 goals and 2 assists for 4 points, and Danton Heinen with the same stat line, 2 and 2 for 4. So I think it's safe to say, Hunter, along with head coach Rick Tocchet, former general manager Jim Rutherford, well, he's got a type.
Yeah, they are the Western Conference version of the Penguins with how much former Penguins they've amassed over there. And speaking of Danton Heinen, really funny story. I remember when the Penguins signed him, and shout out to my best friend, Jeff. He made a small bet with me saying, okay, if he scores 10 plus goals, we'll go to this really good barbecue place and I'll pay for it. And he said, if he doesn't, well, you have to pay for it and you pick the place. So thankfully I won the bet. He had 10 plus goals that season. So Jeff, if you're listening to this, thank you for the free lunch there at Cockeye Barbecue up in Ohio, but just had to tell that story here to start off this segment. But yes, very slow start, at least the first 3 games for the Canucks, but they've won 3 in a row, 3-1-2. The biggest thing is they are getting scoring from most of their big guns, but they still need to get Elias Pettersson going a bit more. He hasn't been very good to start the year. He was kind of a bit quiet in the playoffs for the Canucks this past year. I felt like if he played at a bit of a higher level, they potentially would have advanced past the Oilers, but again, that's neither here nor there. But much like the Oilers, this is a team that you have to slow down up front. That top line of DeBrusk, Miller, and Besser, very good. They brought DeBrusk over during free agency, gave him a lot of term, a lot of money, very deserving. You have Niels Höglander, Jesse Marshall's favorite player, by the way, and you have Pettersson and Connor Garland on that second line. I was wanting the Penguins to acquire Garland for a long time when he was in those trade rumors, but he has performed really well since kind of getting out of those rumors. But again, Danton Heinen, Teddy Bluger, Kiefer Sherwood. You also have Pius Suter, on the fourth line. But yeah, the back end, buddy, it starts with Quinn Hughes. I mean, Hronek is a good partner for him, but Quinn Hughes is one of the 3 best defensemen on the planet. He can do things with the puck that not many other defensemen can do. He is a treat to watch. If there is one weakness that the Penguins can definitely exploit, it's the Canucks goaltending situation right now. Thatcher Demko is still not playing, and by the sounds of it, it's an injury that he's going to have to play through whenever he gets at least back to close to being 100%, but it's either going to be Lankinen or Arthur Shelovs, he played pretty fine in the playoffs, but I still think the Penguins will have at least a small edge in net there. I assure Nedeljkovic is going to go for that game on Saturday. But again, I kind of have the same key against Vancouver like I do against Edmonton. You got to simplify things. You got to be better in your own zone. You got to, again, keep creating the offense that you're creating because they're one of the best teams in terms of offense creation so far this season. It's what's making them a lot more fun to watch this year compared to last year, while they're also finishing their chances. The thing is, they're just giving back all of those chances defensively. So again, if you're able to simplify, take away the Canucks top couple lines, and while also continuing to get that depth scoring, maybe the top 6 also produces as well, the Penguins will have an opportunity to win this game in Vancouver. And you think back to that last game in Vancouver, that was, I felt like, one of the best Penguins wins of the season. They're trailing multiple times in that game. Lars Eller ties it in the third period, and then you have Erik Karlsson with one heck of an overtime winner to kind of, at that point, still keep the Penguins season at least a little bit alive. It was just a joy to watch. But the Canucks, very good team, bona fide Stanley Cup contender. And I know it's on a back-to-back, but the Penguins are going to have to very much bring their A game if they want to win this one. You do not want to give time and space to shooters like Besser, shooters like Miller, Pettersson, Garland, etc.
Absolutely. And to the goaltending point, I will say this. As great as Thatcher Demko is when he comes back, should he be healthy, they have actually gotten a lot of surprises in net. Kevin Lankinen is off to a very solid start, a 3-0 record. He's got a .941 save percentage. And like you said, Arthur Shelov last year in the playoffs was a huge surprise for them when it looked like that their season was going to come to an end strictly because of injuries in net. And he played absolutely lights out. So that's a huge thing for them. But very similarly to Edmonton, this is a younger team with a ton of speed, and they are not afraid to attack. This is very much a part of the Mike Sullivan coaching tree with Rick Tocchet. You can see that he learned an awful lot coaching under Mike Sullivan, and he has taken that attitude with him to Vancouver in the way this team plays. And it's not just a joke that it's, Penguins West because of all the connections, but you can tell that this is the archetype of a team that they're trying to build. They're trying to build off the same successes that the Penguins had when they won the back-to-back Stanley Cups. They are a team that plays a million miles an hour. They've got a very solid depth chart, and they have defensemen that you can depend upon, and you don't have to depend upon goaltending for them. It's very similar to those teams. You have a goalie in Thatcher Demko that you can compare to a Matt Murray when he was at his height, or even a Marc-Andre Fleury, to where they don't need to steal games, but it's nice to know that you have them back there so you can take those risks. You can play that high octane style of hockey because you know that you've got somebody back there that can most of the time bail you out. So this is going to be an extremely tough test for the Penguins, especially coming off what is going to be a battle tonight in Edmonton. So they are going to have to play a very simple game, limit their mistakes, and similarly again to when they play Edmonton tonight, do not let this team go on the man advantage because they will make you pay. And that's not an indictment of the Penguins penalty kill. That's an endorsement of the Vancouver Canucks power play. It can be that good. So they have to be ready to bring their A game. One last thing I want to add, adds no real analysis to this game. It's just a fun fact that I love. Tyler Myers, the defenseman on the Vancouver Canucks, is the last active player in the NHL to have been on the Buffalo Sabres when they were in the Stanley Cup playoffs last, which is wild to me, but I couldn't let this segment pass without mentioning that.
Man, I still can't believe Tyler Myers is in the league just because he's not even close to what he used to be. They gave him another contract. He's just not that good anymore. But hey, they see something there. He does bring the size. He can lay the boom. Again, still kind of confuses me a little bit, but hey,
he very much is another example of a player that was drafted to be the guy, but should not have been seen as the guy. Now that he's a second pairing defenseman who has size, who can move pretty well. He's not slow, but has a solid first pass, but isn't a number one defenseman. He has been able to, I don't know if I would use the word thrive, but he has been a very solid contributor in multiple teams' lineups in that role. So happy to see a guy who got all that responsibility thrust upon him in that draft placement that he had, to go on and be able to carve out a very nice NHL career, because again, got drafted to be the guy, wasn't really equipped to be the guy, but is a solid NHL defenseman. So that's another big one for the Pittsburgh Penguins. That's Saturday night, right in Hunter's wheelhouse, 10 p.m. on Saturday night. So Night Owls rejoice. The Penguins will finish their Western Canada road trip against the Vancouver Canucks Saturday night. But that is going to do it for this segment. When we return, boy, it's the days of our Penguins, isn't it? Because they are never boring, and there's a lot coming out of this Western Canada trip, including Tristan Jarry being sent back to Pittsburgh while the team is on the road. We will talk about that and more when we come back, but we have to tell you about our last sponsor, and that is FanDuel. Hey, NFL fans, you can start the season big with a big return on FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. So when you're sitting down this NFL Sunday and you're watching all the games and you might get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. And you'll get started with $200 in bonus bets guaranteed when you place your first $5 bet. Just go to FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, welcome back to the Friday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. One more time, I'm Patrick Damp. That's Hunter Hodes. And boy, these Penguins, Hunter, they sure are never boring. They will always give us something to talk about. And this trip to Western Canada, certainly no exception, as we found out yesterday that Tristan Jarry is not with the team anymore. He has been sent back to Pittsburgh as part of what Mike Sullivan has called a plan to get him back to his best game. And I'll start it with this. I can see the logic here. I've spoken about it on the show before. If you're going to put him through this training plan or whatever you're going to do to try to get his head back on straight, you don't want to put him through rigorous workouts in practices, morning skates, in the gym, whatever else you're doing with him, and then have him back up that night should Alex Nedeljkovic or Yoel Blomqvist have a poor game or, God forbid, get hurt. and then you have to throw in an already tired goalie who's already in his own head. It's just a recipe for disaster, but it's hard not to look at this and think that they're maybe protecting him a little bit before they maybe try to move on from him. But if they can't do that, this to me is the best way to get him and get his head back on straight, because you're removing him from the pressure of the game. You're removing him from having to start, and you're letting him work on his game. And when he comes back, if and when he comes back, you can see if it worked. And if it didn't, then you address the problem when it's right in front of you.
My question is, why did he come on the road trip at all if you just sent him back to Pittsburgh 2 games into that trip? I felt like you could have just taken Blomqvist and Nedeljkovic on this trip. It kind of just left him in Pittsburgh to have him work on his game for a bit longer, right? I guess I don't understand the logic in doing it halfway through the trip. It was kind of weird to me, I think. But I do think this kind of screams like it's their last ditch effort to try and fix his game, because whenever he does make his next start, if he's still on the team and say he does play poorly again, for example, is below water and goals saved above expected, allows some goals that, again, should be easy saves, I think at that point you'll have no choice but to move on. But I think it feels like in a way we've already gotten to that point right now. Something is going to have to give really soon, I think, with this. I really don't know if you can go through an entire season with this, in my opinion.
No, you can't. You eventually have to make a decision here, whether it's burying him in the AHL and taking that cap space and just hoping that somebody, whether this season or this coming off season, is willing to take him off of your hands or whatever else.
It's going to have to be a trade, I think, in that situation. And I understand his value is at an all-time low right now. Don't get twisted, people. Like, his value is right now. But if you can somehow regain a little bit of that value off of a start or two down the road, I think that would be worth it to get that contract off their books, just because of how crushing it is right now.
And I think that's also part of it as well, is that they're hoping that they can put him through this process and maybe mask some of it if and when he comes back, and they can kind of artificially inflate his value to say like, hey, look, he's figuring it out. But, you can get Kyle Dubas on the phone with some other general managers and just say, hey, listen, he needs a change of scenery. He's still a very good goalie, but for whatever reason, it's not working here. Take a shot on him. We'll take back what we need to take back to get him off our hands, and hopefully he can figure it out with you. I know that's not the best sales pitch, but that to me feels like kind of where they're going with that. But a couple other things reported from our good pal Josh Yohe today, both regarding defensemen. We'll start with the first one, which is Marcus Pettersson. He basically came out and said that he's got to be better. He's not off to a good start. We've seen it, which shows that he's got the self-awareness. But he brought up a really good thing when speaking to Josh, where he said, there's been a lot of talk about goalies, but it's really us in front of him that have been the problem. I saw a stat. We've given up the most slot chances in the league. We have to do a way better job of that. The last game was better, but there's still so much to work on. We love a self-aware king. We really do. He's not wrong in either regard. It's been a very slow start for Marcus Pettersson, uncharacteristically so, but he's also right in the sense that this team has given up the most high danger chances in the National Hockey League. This team is giving up the second most goals per game on average. The only team they're better than is the Philadelphia Flyers, and that's not a good place to be. So overall, I'm happy with these comments, but he does have to find a way to break out of this funk.
Right. And we can say the same about all the defensemen, at least in their own zone to start the year, where they're just not doing their jobs. And also the forwards, especially in their own zone as well. They're not getting the support from the forwards in their own zone. And that's just leading to all these high danger chances against, all these scoring chances against, and all that stuff. So I'm very glad that he's self-aware. He knows he needs to play better. He also knows, that they need to defend a lot better as well. And then you also did see a quote in the article from Erik Karlsson, and where Yohe was asking him to analyze his performance, and Karlsson was like, great. And he even said like, yeah, I'm satisfied with where his game is. And I saw a couple of people on social media upset about that. Like, there was one tweet I saw calling him like a diva or something like that. And I'm just like, what are we doing here? Like, Erik Karlsson right now, if you just look at the counting stats, he is tied for third on this team in points. He has 1 goal and 6 points in 8 games. Lars Eller is also tied with him for 6 points. Only Sidney Crosby and Evgeny Malkin have more points than him this season. If you want to compare his start this year to last year, Erik Karlsson has been a lot better this year compared to his start last year. Last year, he wasn't even really producing that much to start the year, and he also looked out to lunch in the offensive zone. He's always going to look out to lunch in the defensive zone because he doesn't really play defense anymore. And honestly, he hasn't been that good of a player in his own zone throughout his career. You did not acquire Erik Karlsson to play defense like Marcus Pettersson usually does, or someone like a Chris Tanev in the league, or someone like I'm just going to throw out Brandon Montour, who used to be on the Panthers, or someone like Gustav Forsling. Of course, he is great in his own zone. You did not acquire Erik Karlsson to be any of those players. You acquired him to push offense in the offensive zone and to be a really good playmaker and occasionally fire pucks from the point. And he is doing that to start the season. Yeah, did he have a rotten effort against Buffalo? Absolutely. Yes, has he been bad in his own zone this year? Yes, but you know what? He was also bad in his own zone last year. One of the positives, at least from this season so far, to me, is that Erik Karlsson has been better to start this year compared to last year. I understand a lot of people like to pick on him, but it's not just him that's stinking in the defensive zone, people. It's basically every single one of their defensemen and all the forwards as well. That is a group stat with how many high danger chances they have given up, how many scoring chances they have given up, the rate per 60 rate as well. So picking on one guy, you're missing the forest for the trees.
I'm right with you on that. And I also look at it this way. Marcus, like you kind of alluded to it, Marcus Pettersson is supposed to be a two-way defenseman, if not more of a defensive defenseman. So his start being this way is alarming because you count on him for that one exact thing. On the flip side, you're counting on Erik Karlsson to produce, and so far he's producing. And when you are the stature of player like Erik Karlsson, the last thing you want out of a player like that is a crisis of confidence. You don't want him to come out and say, oh yeah, I'm terrible. I'm the worst. I should be sent down to the minors. I should be cut. I shouldn't even be on this team. No, you want him to think I'm the best player on this team. I'm playing my ass off. And yeah, is he bad defensively? Of course he is. He's always been bad defensively. That's been the knock on him since he entered the league. But at the end of the day, if he's producing, I'm happy. Does he need to improve his defensive game? Of course he does. But like you said, the entire team has to improve their defensive game. And I don't want that to come off as a blind defense or putting up a shield to defend Erik Karlsson. I'm not saying he's been great, but at the very least, he's fulfilled the role he needs to fill as an offensive defenseman. And if he rounds a few things out throughout the next couple weeks, I'll be very happy with where Erik Karlsson is. But that is going to do it for the Friday edition of the Locked On Penguins podcast. We will be back on Monday. We might have a special guest that we're working on, so keep your eyes out for that and tune in when we may have that special guest. But regardless of that, we will be back with an episode on Monday. We'll recap both of these games from the weekend and get you set for the week ahead. But until then, for Hunter Hodes, I'm Patrick Damp. Thank you as always for tuning in, and we will be back on Monday.